You might have a great degree from a great college, but why are there so many millionaires out there who don't have any of that? What if I told you that your degree is a higher floor, but not necessarily the launching pad you need to greater success? Well, we're going to talk with Brendon and Elliot today. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what it takes to be that millionaire. And we're going to give you some steps on how to get there.
Hi, welcome back to Blunt Force Business. I'm Brian LaFauci.
And I'm Patrick Marino.
And today we are fortunate enough to be visited by our friend, Brendon Elliot. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. So as always, we're going to jump right into our Blunt Force facts. We want to make our people millionaires quick. This is like a 10X video, right?
This is a little bit of a 10X video, a little bit. We're not promising millionaires out of this one, but...
But we're promising.
Blunt
Force fact number one is better degrees are a higher floor, not necessarily a higher ceiling. What do we mean by that, Patrick?
So if you're part of a good college, then you've got this great network. You come out of it, you know people. There's people who've been successful at the college, but like really just coming out of that into a working environment doesn't guarantee anything. Like it's always going to be what you do after you enter the workforce.
Blunt Force fact number two we're going to talk about today is if you want to make money, you got to be close to the money.
There are a couple of key things within a business that drive revenue. The people who are most involved in that are going to be the people who make the most money at a company. And the farther your role at the company is from those revenue producing roles, the less likely you are going to be in that millionaire club.
And Blunt Force fact number three for today is that you don't make wealth, you create wealth.
There are very, very few people who make a salary that makes them $1 million. You're talking about multinational companies, right? People don't make $1 million salaries. People who make $1 million make it because they're selling or because they're the owner of the company.
We always love the stories of, everyone can pick out the stories like that guy, they talk about all the time. Bill Gates, he dropped out of college and he did this and he did we always target the those like outliers, but I don't think they're outliers. And I think that's what today's conversation is about.
There's going to be some things that connect these people, right? And one of the story that I wanted to bring up was, okay, so I'm involved in marketing. I started my own marketing agency and, I make a decent amount of money, but I was a little bit nervous about the up and down of the business for a little bit. And I was like, maybe I should now take this resume that I have and put myself out there. I had a recruiter, I had people looking for it. And I found some CMO roles, chief marketing officers, these are C-suite roles at big companies.
It's a district manager job. It's a big fucking deal.
Big companies. And the salary range was not as much as I was making.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and these people had to have 15 years, which they had to have more marketing experience than I had. They had to have a master's degree, right? And the worst part is they couldn't just leave in the middle of the day and play golf like I can, right? and they couldn't just leave in the middle of the day and go to their son's soccer game, right? And so all the control I had and not as much of the money, it was really an eye-opening thing for me, for sure.
Brendon, you deal in the financial world.
Yes, sir.
Right? So
it's exhilarating.
What
an exhilarating industry to be in.
It is riveting.
There's two reasons I think Brendon's perfect for this conversation. One is because he's doing very well for himself. But two, when we first had our conversation, you talked about a lot of the people that you worked with.
Yeah.
Right. And so so some of these people who are C-suite people who are making, a couple $100,000 a year, but they have this ceiling because they're employees. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not rewarded at the level like a sales professional might be rewarded at a person. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you came from and why you believe what you believe.
Yeah. So Brendon Elliot, grew up locally in Massachusetts, South Shore, Massachusetts, oldest of four, single mother. Very blue collar, I'd say, middle class, humble upbringing. To us, it was neither of my parents went to college. So there was a heavy emphasis on you should go to college, but if you don't, it's okay, right? Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to be okay with some athletic areas. So I had an opportunity to go down to Florida and play baseball, which is great. 4 years in to that, I realized, boy, am I good at a lot of social things. But boy, am I not very good with a lot of academic things. And that was by choice. And so I remember calling my parents my second semester, senior year, and saying, I should probably come home, right, and get an education because I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And that's not what the $160,000 tuition bill it was for. So I decided to come back, it was Bridgewater State College back then, right? Did a 5th year there, double timed my both semesters because obviously not all the credits transfer. And then, right out of college, had an opportunity to work for a Fortune 100 financial firm, New York Life, Life Securities, right? And really, what drew me to that, even though I didn't have a background in finance, what drew me to that was the training and the opportunity, right? It was not only are we going to train you, but we're never going to tell you that you've made too much money. Right. And so for me as an athlete who is directly connected to the harder you work, the better your performance, and then obviously all the rewards that come with that, instantly drawn to that platform. And so I started working right out of the gate. And the thing when you're working in money is you want the people who are rich, right? I was a 20-year-old kid and I did not exactly have the best reputation in the neighborhood, right? And so I decided to go a different route and work more with the blue-collar working class people, right? Because those were my people. And turns out I was pretty good at it. And so I built my book of business basically twice as fast as the plan, right, or their system preaches. And so when I was 26, they actually made me partner in the firm, right? So that was a huge accomplishment. But now I was in management, right? And so I went in, I was in management for 4 years, ran a great team. But instead of actually working with the client, I was now managing people. Right, I was on the sidelines, but I was in the coach's box. Right, and after 4 years of being in management for a Fortune 100 company, I had basically gotten a PhD in the real world, right, of what it takes to run a business.
Yep.
And so 2 months before my wedding, which shout out to my wife for her constant support, I woke up. She asked me what I was going to talk to the CEO about today in our meeting, and I said I'm going to resign and start my own company. Right, and she thought I was nuts, but she said, "Honey, I've never doubted you. I'm not going to start now." Right, and I said, "Well, if I do this right, I bet you I can pay for our wedding in the next 2 months," right? And sure enough, we did. That was 7 years ago. We started Cornerstone Financial Group, and here we are, thriving, and we've had our 5th best year in a row. So for whatever that's worth, I think that's why I'm here with you guys today.
All with a 6-year Bridgewater State College education.
Yeah, and as we said, lots of people go to school for 8 years. Yeah. Right? So there it is.
I think it's interesting. One of the reasons I like this conversation is because there's definitely and you're going to talk about this. I'm going to let you use your words and not mine. But there's definitely a little bit of, I don't know if you feel the same way, but there's a little bit of, jealousy, resentment from people who have 7-year degrees, who actually went to actually the doctorate at the end of that, and not just a couple of those years we kind of erase because we don't really remember them. Yeah. Like the people who have they actually have that, but there's that little bit of resentment blurry from people who go to school for a long time and have this freaking formal education and are experts in their field, and they're not making. They're making by any stretch of the imagination, they're making this upper class salary, right? Upper middle class salary where they're doing very, very well. The retirement, they have the family, maybe the kids are in private school, but it is a world away from the jet setting crowd, right? And I think there's a lot of resentment because a lot of those people a lot of times did not have the doctorate, right? They didn't go to the fancy school, right? And so you're kind of in that. Yeah. That's kind of you, right? You went to Bridgewater, and you could probably buy and sell a lot of these people.
I'll tell you, I love when somebody goes, "You're so lucky." They see the nice things that my wife and I have, and what I'm able to provide for my family, and my schedule, and my flexibility. Which is funny because as an entrepreneur, you think flexibility is a benefit, right? It's actually one of the biggest Achilles heel to the success of an entrepreneur is the flexibility, right? And obviously we can talk about that, but I was like, "You're lucky." You're lucky. Oh, you're lucky you have these nice things. You're lucky that you get to do this. You're lucky that you make the money that you make and all that without a fancy degree. And I always look at them and I'm like, if that's what you think produced all this, you ain't ever going to have it, pal. Right? Because if you think it was luck and not just grit, hard work, dedication, constantly reevaluating yourself, constantly failing.
Risk. You have to throw risk in
risk,
there.
100%.
You have to throw risk in there because that's the thing. That to me is the block that people have. And I think one of the big benefits that our listeners can get out of this conversation as we're kind of talking through these blunt force facts is, let's say you're living in that W-2 world, right? There is nothing stopping you, especially to blunt force fact number 3, where, you don't get paid wealth, you build wealth. There is nothing stopping you from taking a risk outside of that W-2 world while you still have it.
Right.
To build additional wealth.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's how I start. My first entrepreneurial venture was in real estate, and we still have a very, very, thriving real estate company. And that's where it all started. And it was while I was a school psychologist, working a W-2 job and but wanting this, everything we're talking about today, realizing that, they're not going to pay me $300,000 a year to be at school site. What the fuck? But I got my advanced degree, and there's a lot of letters.
You owe 300. You're not
Oh,
making
wait.
Right.
So is that number in parentheses? Is that what it is?
I mean,
Is that on the balance sheet?
I worked in the nonprofit world, and those social workers who go to school for a long time to get an advanced social work degree and then get out of school and they make $30,000 a month.
Yeah.
And have by far the hardest job.
Hardest job, and
They're
they're
tough.
super smart.
Yeah.
They're
Yes.
like ridiculously smart.
I mean, I was brilliant. So
Was.
But I mean, the biggest thing that when I started down that path was wanting to build wealth and taking that risk with just like we're talking about, I took the risk with the higher floor, because even though I wasn't going to make a ton of money, I could provide for my family on my salary with a good job that I liked, that was stable, blah, blah, and gave me the flexibility to start and take a little risk over here, and go down that risk road. And I give a lot of credit. And eventually I made that decision that I think a lot of us make, and you've talked about it, where we say, and you just talked about it, we say, all right, I'm all in on this now. I trust, and I really am impressed with the people that decide to take that risk when they're like, all right, I'm going to just jump. Like, I haven't even started the thing, but I'm going all in.
I was making a salary when I started my
right. And I work with companies all the time through our consulting business that I'm always impressed with, because that's their play. Like, one of our big contracts is working with a lot of veterans, and that's their play. Like, they're like, all right, I'm going to come off active duty now. I got a little bit of a pension that's going to come in. Mm-hmm. It's not going to make me $1 million, but it'll keep the lights on, and I'm going to make this jump and take a little risk, and I'll constantly go back to that, because the people that say that, you're so lucky, you're so blessed, they're hardworking. Mm-hmm. I don't, they all they get up, they go to work, they work hard, and I say, what's the differentiator? Like, why am I here and you and we had this gap? Well, the only thing that I always can look back at is I was willing to take a risk, and you weren't. And it doesn't make me better or smarter or anything.
Not at all.
More competent, doesn't make me I don't like when people look at it like, well, I work so much. Well, all right, you might work hard and you might work hard, but so doesn't the person that I know that gets up and works a job that maybe isn't that great, but works fucking 60 hours a week. They still work hard. It was risk to me. So much of it is that. It's risk aversion.
Also,
tolerance.
when you do jump, when you're willing to take that risk and you jump, when you land, sink roots. And I think that's another part that a lot of people miss. When you land, you got to sink some roots. And let me tell you this, and I don't like to look into the camera often, but let me tell you this. The study or whoever came out with this, the average millionaire has 8 sources of income, is fucking bullshit. All right, let me tell you that, because nobody reads the fine print on that. And what I mean by that is somebody reads that and they go, cool, I got to go do 8 things.
Right.
No, you're doing 8 things, and it's not even at 1/8 capacity. You're doing those 8 things at 1/10 capacity, which means you're just a really busy, broke person that doesn't have a handle on anything. Right. So
are we going to the 80-20 rule from here?
Talk about that.
Okay. And so at the end of the day, when you come in and you take that leap, you take that risk, when you sit and you find that you've taken the right risk and this is the area you want to be in, start sinking those roots and make sure you do whatever you got to do to make those roots sink as deep and deeper than all of your competition. And then when it starts spitting out that money, right, that you worked and put your ass on the line for, then you can start reallocating it to make other sources of income. Because I do agree, you got to have multiple sources of income to make 7 figures, right? But it's not at 1/10 capacity. You're just really busy doing everything half-assed.
Yeah.
Right. And so not only did you take the risk, but you think you're an entrepreneur because you're taking risks. No, you're taking a bunch of uncalculated, half-hearted risks. And that's just as dangerous as not taking the risk.
We are going to talk about quickly the 80-20 rule because I want you to talk about that again.
Sure.
But the way that you talked about it the first time you and I talked is it's not that you're doing the million things. You still have 8 things going on, but there are 1 thing or 2 things that are your freaking bread and butter.
Yeah.
And that's where you're making your money. Because we've done the Pareto principle, which you might be familiar with, which is the 80-20 rule, which is 20% of what you do is going to account for 80% of your output.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're going to basically tell us right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly what it is. And I mean, not much more to elaborate on it than that is everybody's got the self-help book and everybody with an Instagram is a fucking motivational speaker, right? Or everybody with a some kind of platform where they can video themselves is going to tell you how you need to do it. But they haven't actually become the expert in their field. And not only did they not become the expert in their field, but they're not even the one at the top of their own company. Right? Or in that higher echelon or closest to the money. Right. And so I'm an entrepreneur because I got involved in 7 different things. I'm an accountant, but I can also do energy, but I also sell protein out of my trunk. Right. Like that doesn't do which one am I referring to?
I'm always buying protein out of somebody's trunk.
So
is that a good source
at
of
the end of the
protein?
day, I'm building
a bag of heroin, one of those things of protein.
I meant protein actually.
Balance.
But at the end of the day, I'm sitting here going, oh wow, you're an accountant. I want to, let me find out if I can refer some business to you and let's get this. And they go, okay, cool. Well, I can also check your energy bill. I go, what the fuck? Who are you?
Yeah.
Are you my accountant?
Who are you using for
solar
solar right now?
It's a
What are
great
you
point.
doing?
Yeah, it's a great point. And
know?
I mean, I think it's it's very easy on these podcasts to get off on these branches because that's a branch.
Yeah.
But it's worth. I like the base of what you're saying there. I think is very important in the sense that when we make this jump, and if we really want to make significant money, the root of this conversation is that there's 2 ways we talked about at the beginning you get there. And the one way, which is the way we talk about it all the time, is entrepreneurship is the way. Because it's the way where effort can most closely tied to reward because it's most closely tied to the money. And then the W-2 way we mentioned, which I think most mimics entrepreneurship from any other W-2 job you can get there is sales. And that's why a lot of sales men and women end up going the entrepreneur route, very similar to what you did, because you were in a sales position, right? So you were at the financial group with the job to sell, and you became a high producer. And then they did what happens, too frequently is you're really good at producing, but now we're going to move you over here, not produce
Take
anymore.
you off the field.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it
All-star
almost
shortstop stuck in the coach's box.
Exactly.
Great idea.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, we do that in every entity. I talk about that in the military. Military does that. It's the worst at that. They take these people who are so good at the tactical execution of their job, and because they've been in that rank grade long enough, they promote them, and now they're not tactically executing anymore, and they're doing something they suck at, right?
It's the Peter principle, right? You always get promoted to the point where you're incompetent.
Yep.
Right. Everyone gets promoted to the point where they actually can't do the job anymore.
Yep.
And that's where they get stuck.
Yep.
And then that's what you do for the rest of your career is you do the thing that you can't do.
Not well.
You do well, and then you get to the point where you can't do well, and now that's your
I would like to throw a disclaimer out there. One of the most important mentors in my life, who is a savage at every single level, and his name is Peter. So I would like to say he is the anomaly.
Principle?
He is the anomaly to that principle. But anyways, that does happen.
Yeah. Yep. And that was the case very much too in the psychology world, because the people they get put in managerial positions are just the most tenured psychologists, and then they're not doing psychology anymore. From the standpoint,
plus that's not a transferable skill. It's like if you're really good at selling, you might not be good at managing. You're probably not, right? It's because it's a different skill. It's a different skill set.
Ted Williams, one of the best baseball players of all time. Worst coach probably in the history of baseball.
Most really good athletes make horrible coaches because it's so innate for them.
Yeah, I heard
Larry Bird wasn't great.
No,
you know what I mean?
GM, but
yes,
I heard a story that Ted Williams, when he got out of playing and he was a coach, his best hitter was in a slump. So they're taking batting practice on the field, right? And he's just mechanics are way off, all this other stuff. And Ted Williams pissed. He had to get the fuck. Right? Give me the bat. Gets up. He's like 60, right? Throw it in there. Bam. Smashes it, right around Pesky's pole, right? And he comes out and he throws the bat to the guy who's in the thick of his career and goes, just do that, right? And the guy goes, I'm not Ted Williams. right? Ted Williams stopped coaching after that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's true.
Well,
It's
the
true.
timeline might be a little
The
off on
best
that, don't hold me to
coaches
it,
are,
but yeah.
you know, and like you said, talk about tangents, we go on, but the best coaches are usually the players that were good, not great, but were good because the work ethic was there and they had to be better here than athletically. And so that becomes translatable.
And psychologically, to the whether you're the CEO or you're in sales or whatever it is, you can work for somebody else. But if you're close to the money because you're the revenue driver, right? So you're in sales. I always think it's interesting that sales, for some reason or another, gets this weird connotation or this weird stigma that's attached to it. As far as I'm concerned, here's how I view sales, right? The only part of my job on a daily basis that is sales is that I have something that you need. It's your job to do it with me. It's your job to get it from me. That's it. The rest is relationship building. The rest is leveraging resources. But you need something. I'm not going door to door selling vacuums, right? And convincing you need a new vacuum. What my job is to say, identify where there's a need. Say, you need this in general. So my job in the sales department is just to make sure if you're going to do it, you're going to do it with me. And that's it. And that's what, maybe 10% of the whole process is just to get in front of the actual person. And then from there, you go to work. So I'm always real cautious when people are like, well, I'd love to make more money. Salespeople make more money. I could never be in sales. I could never be. Whoa. You can go to all the sales courses that you want. The only part about it being a successful entrepreneur that is sales is identifying the need and making sure that you're in a position to get them to do it with you versus somebody else. How hard is that?
Right. That's a great, fantastic analogy of that part of it, because that part of it's overwhelming for people all the time. It's very overwhelming.
Well, that's where I think a lot of the resentment comes in, where it's just like, because I know, like just my high school, for example, when I think about the person who I feel like is probably the most financially successful, was not the one who went to the Ivy League. Right? He's a people person, right? He's out there, he's selling something. I don't know what the hell he's selling, but he's out there and he's freaking super successful, right? And it's like, but resentment's probably the wrong thing, but I do think that there is that, and I know you've talked about some of these people where it's, you have the degree and you work really hard and you're high up in your company or whatever it is, but there is that ceiling, and maybe you get a bonus if your company does well, you get a bonus. But if you're, and as much as maybe being the entrepreneur isn't always sales, the entrepreneur is directly related to how well the business is doing.
100%.
Right. So there's no fall guy. It's just like you are the fall guy, right? And that's where Brian's risk comes into play too. So in terms of the conversation we're having, without that risk of the no floor, you can't reach the higher levels either, right? So it's like you have to sacrifice the floor,
right,
to a certain extent.
How about this? When you're an entrepreneur, you get all the spoils of war. Right? You work your ass off, you're successful, you get to spend all the money. But when you fail, the only person that you get to blame is the person staring back to you in the mirror when you brush your teeth. And that's a very harsh reality that most people can't handle, right? That aren't entrepreneurs, at least. And I'm not saying that makes entrepreneurs better or worse than anybody. I like to tell people when I may be bringing in a new advisor into our firm, into Cornerstone, I say, listen, anybody can do this, but it's not for everyone. Right? So if you think about that, I'm going to give you all the tools, all the resources, all the instructions, and all the help that you could possibly need, but you got to do all the work. And psychologically, most people cannot. They want the reward, right? They want what I have, but they're not willing to do what I do.
Well, because everything, you look at it in the same way as an investment broker, right? You look at your financial future in the same way you look at investment, and it's almost a cost of capital analysis, right? So when people think about,
You must have went to college. I said you must have went to college.
Professor LaFauci.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So if I look at risk reward, which is every decision, the risk reward of that might not be as much money, but it's coming every week. So the risk is literally a 1. This other one has the risk of a 10, under 1 to 10, but the reward is 10x.
Yes, sir.
I love 10x because it's so cheesy that people will be like,
you're a Grant
fucking
Cardone guy.
off the video. He said 10x, shut it off.
mean,
It's either goes one of two ways.
oh my God,
It's going to
I'm
go
in.
one of two ways.
I'm
They're
in
either
the
like, I mean,
10X.
he said 10x. You hear that 10x? It must
for
be the best.
$9.99, you can buy our seminar.
Buy this
right?
video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm selling wigs tomorrow. So
Protein on your trunk.
protein and wigs on my trunk. But I do want to touch on blunt force fact number 3 a little bit in the importance of looking at this from a, you don't get paid wealth, you create wealth, because that one resonated really well for me as a real estate investor and having that of one of my entrepreneurial streams, right? But when I first started in that, I was very young. And for at least the first 15, 16 years, could you imagine how many dollars I took personally as payment as we acquired, as that business grew? And the answer was 0. For about 15, 16 years, my partner and I took $0. So there was no cash coming in. And in the day-to-day grind, you sometimes are like, what are we doing? It's always tough to pay bill. You're paying bills and you're doing this, you're doing that. And you're like, the bank account's not huge. It's doing its thing. It's not, how does there not $1 million in that bank account? We've been doing this for 13, 14 years. And then one day we liquidated some stuff. And that was the moment where I realized, wow, we created serious wealth. Not, through the grind of this action with very little direct money coming in on a day-to-day basis. You stop for a minute and and you can look at a balance sheet and be like, yeah, on paper, on paper, I look great. That's on paper, right? It's not in my bank account, right? It's not anywhere like I can.
You don't pay your mortgage with your balance
doesn't pay
sheet.
my mortgage. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great way to put that, right? But the moment I saw it liquefied, I was like, that's what all that work did. Right. But it had to take the moment of wow, I was able to throw that into my bank account when I needed it so I think one of the key things that makes millionaires is that, right? So it is the ability to say, I'm building wealth, not a bank account right now. And I'm making financial decisions that are building wealth. And like you said, there are plenty of businesses out there where somebody pays himself, and bankrupts the business, and it's worth 0 at the end.
Sometimes as well, I think that about the state school thing, it's like you don't walk out of it. It's different. Like if you walk out of an Ivy League school, you're probably walking into a position that you got recruited for.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're walking out of a state school,
Good
you
luck.
are walking into there's a bunch of things you could do, but it's not the same where you have this you're on a path. You're not, and that almost maybe is almost an advantage.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that ties back to something that we already said, and I don't know if it was offline or not, but that guaranteed salary is it's guaranteeing that's all that you're going to make, right? And for some people, that's a great setup, right? And I think that's great for them. But if you are a listener or a watcher here and you have a different mindset, let me spin it a different way. When you're in a salaried position, right, it's a win-lose. And what do I mean by that, right? In that position, in that relationship, somebody wins and somebody loses all the time. Every 10 out of 10 times, somebody wins, somebody loses. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When I'm in a salary position, I'm working at some big company, right? And I'm in some department. I've got my cube, right? It's nice and steady Eddie. I'm either going to, and I'm getting paid $75,000 a year, okay? I'm either going to do more work than what the $75,000 is paying me. So who wins? The company, right? Or, right? And so who loses? I do. Right? I'm putting in $150,000 effort, but I'm getting paid $75,000 because it's guaranteed. So I have to forfeit the other $75,000. Who keeps that? The CEO, the board, the whomever, right? The balance sheet.
Yep.
Win, lose. Now let's flip that coin, right? I'm making $75,000 guaranteed, right? I'm like, I don't really have to work that hard because nobody really checks up on me, right? Now I'm winning because I'm putting in $50,000 effort, but I'm making 75, right? Let me ask you a question. Any good company, any real successful company, how many times are you going to be able to get away with that before they have the you lose conversation.
I feel like it's about a year. I can make it.
Rinse.
It's about a year. 9 months was. I think I made it up to a year now.
So I just think about that. I'm like, so when I thought about that, and a real quick story comes to mind when I was first interviewing out of college, right? And I killed this interview, and I went to go work I semi-accepted a position, and I said, they brought me over to my workspace, right? And there was another guy next to me, and yes, I judged a book by its cover, but I was 20 years old and I didn't care. And I looked over and I'm like, right? And I said, so how much? What's the? How much am I going to make? And he goes, oh, we start everybody at 60, which right out of college, I'm thinking I've never even had $60, let alone 60 grand, right?
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I go, we went back to the manager's office and I said, how much is that guy in the cube next to me going to make? He goes, we start everybody at 60. Isn't that great? I said, yeah, I don't want the job. And he went, excuse you? I said, see, here's what's going to happen. Because of who I am, I'm going to do in a week what it takes that guy to do in a month, whether because he's lazy or I'm just going to be competitive. So I'm not going to be okay in month 2, 3, 4, knowing that I'm doing 10 times the work this person's doing and I cash the same check and I have to wait for the next check. That isn't me. And he goes, then this isn't the career for you. He's like, you probably want sales or something like that. I said, I think we just identified what the rest of my life is going to look like. You know what I mean? So that's that win-lose complex, right? Putting yourself in a position for it to be win-win. Even when you are not successful as an entrepreneur or you miss, right? Or you don't land that case, or you don't land that client, you still won if you're a good entrepreneur because you went, shit. Now let's debrief and reevaluate of what I can do better next time. And then make sure that you put yourself in that position to next time and then just don't miss.
I love the Jocko good. Because I believe in it. And I believe that the most difficult experience I had as an entrepreneur was, when we bought the sport complex we're in right now filming, and then we did a massive renovation, dumped a ton of money into it, and then 8 months later, COVID said, you got to shut down. That was hands down the most difficult time ever. We're staring down a multi-million-dollar personally guaranteed note, and the world says I can't open. Best experience I ever had.
Yeah.
Like most difficult, most stressful, most, you could take it, didn't play out at all the way we knew it could have. We ended up selling because we're like, all right, we gotta protect. But from a learning standpoint, we came out of it whole.
Yeah.
Right. And that experience was the most motivating thing ever because I had no choice in that moment but to figure everything out. I had my money, I had friends' money, I had a bank loan, I had like all of that operating on your shoulders. When you figure that out, I honestly, and it sounds arrogant when I say this, but I tell people this all the time. Give me anything right now, I'll figure it out. I can figure it out. Give me any company. I might not know how to make the widget or do that. I'll get someone that knows how to do that. But when you have to really experience the suck of like, all right, here it is. Good luck. You can't, there's no better tool than that.
I think it's only arrogant if you can't back it up.
True. Okay.
If you can back it up, that ain't arrogance.
Yeah.
Right? If I say something and I know I can back it up and then I back it up,
Yeah.
that's not arrogant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As far as I'm concerned. I mean, if you boast about it, that's different. But if you can back it up, that's not arrogant.
Because I think back and I take prior to that, I had flaws and gaps that I could have.
Yeah.
Because they were, the other things would backfill for them and it would still be okay. And we would still, we still could do well and I could still manage and grow and do all that stuff. But when backed into a failure corner of like, you're going to fail here unless you figure this shit out. Because you can't have any more gaps. It's not like, because otherwise the failure will be massive. So you have no choice. You can either fold, which that's not my nature, right? Or you're like, all right, I have no choice but to fill it.
I'm so big into the psychology. I don't have a psychology degree, right? But I read into all that stuff, and not just from a sales perspective, but from an entrepreneurial perspective, and just every aspect of my life. I try to constantly self-evaluate. But here's what I realized, right? And this goes back to that intellectual versus businessman, right? I'm not the best intellect, right? I wouldn't even put myself one dot into that column, but boy, I'm going to push all my eggs in the basket of being a businessman. And when it ties a savage businessman, by the way, right? That's what I like to hold myself accountable towards, right? But when you talk about those Ivy League schools, and nothing against Ivy League schools at all. I mean, God bless you if you had the opportunity to go there versus say a state school or no school at all. Right? Here's what I like to do for an analogy when I think about it, or if I ever go, oh, I don't have that degree from Harvard, or I don't have that MBA, right? Mm-hmm. You could have a purebred dog, right? The purest of purebred. Beautiful. DNA is perfect. You bring it home, right? And all it's ever known, you pamper it, and all it's ever known is the nice life, right? Somebody tries to break into your house. That dog's going to go run in the corner. It's going to go run outside. It's going to roll over on its back and show you its belly. You bring that junkyard dog that's had to fight and scratch and claw for every drop of food, for every shelter, for every warm space in a cold winter. You bring them and you adopt that junkyard dog into your home and you give it a warm, safe place to sleep and a fresh bowl of water and some fresh food every day. Let somebody even look at your house. That dog will put its life on the line for you and your family because you've given it an opportunity, because it knows what it's like to live through scratching, clawing, and survival, right? And so when I'm hiring people, I'm in the process of hiring new people right now for the 2024 year. I don't give it. Somebody comes in, they have the most beautiful resume, right? I come in, I go, great, that got you here. That doesn't get you the job. I want a junkyard dog. I want to know when you're backed up against the wall, are you going to fight for this family? Are you going to fight for yourself? Or are you going to roll over and show your belly? And I think as an entrepreneur, if you don't have that, you're not. You need to start finding out how to get that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's for me from a psychology perspective. It's that junkyard dog.
Yeah. And to the point, back to our topic today, the degree is great and it can give you some great stuff, but it doesn't give you that, and a lot of times, as a result, doesn't lead to the millionaire.
What are the takeaways? To me, there's a couple of takeaways. One is for the person who is kind of has that ceiling. To me, there's a couple of different ways of looking at this. One is kind of just the recognition. Okay, it's like I'm not going to be the 7-figure person, probably, if I don't have some risk. If I'm not taking on risk, right? You probably just can't get there without the risk. Recognizing that you have to be close to some sort of whether you call it value creation, whether it's I think that's a big part of it. Like it's what I tell my boy. It's like because he has an appreciation for some of the nicer things. I'm like, look, like then your job is not going to be to go. He wants to work in like video games, something like that. I'm like, your job is not to go work for a company. Your job is whatever you do is to create value, right? If you can create something that people want, whether it's you're selling somebody else's product, which is part of it, right? You're as you said, you're filling somebody's need, right? It's not selling. You're taking somebody. Here's what you need. Here's what I got, and your job is to get it from me, right? But that's how you create that next level. That's how you get to the 7 figures. You don't get to it by just working for a company. And then I think the takeaway is if you are at the point where you're like a standard W-2, right? And you're just working for a company. What can you do to get out of that? Like, how can you get out of that without leaving? How can you get closer?
To build on it. How to build on it.
Right. Or you can do what you're saying. You can do real estate investment outside of it. You create a side gig or whatever it is. But I think a part of it is like, how close can you get to the revenue source? Right. Like a big thing in the marketing world is they're actually having fewer CMOs and more CGOs or CROs and the growth in revenue, right? So it's like, you're not just marketing for, you're not just creating branding and you're not just creating trifold flyers, right? You're not just creating the website, you're not creating the messaging, but every single thing you do, whether it's a digital campaign or whatever it is, it's creating revenue, right? You're part of the driver. So you're more closely to the sales, you're going out, you're creating partnerships that are directly related to the bottom line. And I think that if you're in one of those positions, if you're a C-suite or if you're a manager, right, and you want to take the next level, can you maybe, how do I find my way to revenue? How can I get closer to the driving parts of the business? And then can I maybe meet with my manager and structure my position? Maybe I take a cut. I take a lower salary, but I have more risk in how the performance of the company is.
Don't be good at what you do and bad at business, right? And so how do you do that? First thing is understand how to be good at something, right? And work your ass off, eat, sleep, and breathe it. Make it become your identity about what you do and what you want to do, right? But then how do you become good at business? Well, if you're not naturally gifted, right, you don't just have that brain, right? You need to start leveraging your resources, right? So I knew I was good with people. I could interact. I wasn't nervous to talk to new people, right? So that was a skill that most people don't have. Okay. So, but I didn't know the financial planning world. So what did I do? I leveraged my resources. I looked at the people who were more successful than me and I attached myself to them and I brought them clients and I took cuts on what my comp was because I looked at it and said, yeah, I got to split this with you 50-50, but I'm going to steal 100% of your process. Right. And so after doing that, now when it's the roles are reversed, right. And now newer advisors are taking me out so they can learn from me. I tell them that. I said, you're going to give me 50% of this commission split, but I'm going to give you 100% of my process for free. So I say, when you love my process, just understand 85% of it is stolen. Now with permission, but 85% of it was absorbed. The only part that's truly me is the 15% that I sprinkled on top, right? And then the last part about it, which is probably the most important part for me when people ask me about my success, specifically in my business. You have all the designations, you have all the licenses, all those letters after your name, but you have no one to talk to about it. You're just the smartest broke guy in the office, and I can't pay my bills with that. And although money doesn't buy happiness, it buys the second most important things, and those things make me fucking happy. Right. And so if I'm looking at this, I'm going, you may be in finance, you might be in medical, you might be in whatever you're in, real estate. Right. But if you don't understand that every day you wake up and your number one job is prospecting and marketing, right? You might be in real estate, but you're the CEO of a marketing department, your own marketing department. Because if you don't have anybody to talk to, go write a book because you ain't going to make any other money. You feel me? So that's when I look at that, when I self-check myself or I get caught in the weeds a little bit or I lose my way a little bit in my business or where I'm trying to go, I fact check these three things and I'm like, I know I'm good at what I do. Am I good at business right now? Am I leveraging the resources that I have available to me? And if I don't have the right resources, then I need to go find and implement those resources because there is a void and I can't hit that next tier until I create that new relationship for the better leverage. And you bet your ass I'm not sitting in a corner writing memoirs about all the shit I know. I'm trying to get in front of as many people as I can humanly get in front of, right? And then leveraging other relationships in my company so that they can get in front of as many people because it all comes back, right? And so those are, I don't know which one of those blunt force facts that those three things fall under, but if I had to have a decree, that would be would be me.
Well, I think it goes through all of them. I mean, blunt force fact number one is a better degree is a higher floor, not a ceiling. Blunt force fact number two, if you want to make money, you got to be close to the money. And blunt force fact number three, you don't get paid wealth, you create wealth. And I think the topics you just gave us are action points that fall under those global themes, right? And things that have really helped you get there. And at the end of the day, the goal of this conversation is to help our listeners get to that six-figure dream.
To understand what. Yeah, it's almost like you have to understand business. We talked about it before. Like, a lot of entrepreneurs aren't good at business. They're good at something.
A thing.
Right? They're good at something. But like being able to turn something into a business.
Yeah.
That's where you make the money. Yeah. It's like once it becomes a business, how do you supply and demand? How do I supply people with something that they want and then they pay me for it?
Awesome.
That's it.
Brendon, Elliot, Cornerstone Financial, how can people find you?
You can find me on our website, which is cstonefinancial.com. We're on all the social media platforms, on Twitter as well. So, but our website.
Who's your ideal customer?
Like who's our ideal client? So it's interesting. That has morphed over the years. But if I were to look at from a financial planning perspective, I came up with a little bit of a new category. I call them the 7 and 7. Right? Remember the old drink there, Seagram 7s and 7-Up? 7 and 7 for us is somebody who is 7 years until they retire, or it's been 7 years, or they're within the 7 years since they retired, right? Because that 14-year window is so unbelievably crucial to get an idea, get a plan, but get a proactive plan, right? A proactive plan is things are going to change. And when things change, we need to be able to say, yep, we've got a plan for that. So now let's make adjustments. versus most people are very reactive, especially with their money, right? And reactive is something happens, oh shit, now what, right? So I'm in the business of eliminating, oh shit, now what, right? So if I were to say something, the 7 and 7 is probably my ideal client at this point. And boy, do I love working with blue collar business owners. They are by far the backbone of this beautiful country that we have, where we get to sit around on a Wednesday morning and talk into microphones to each other, right? And so if I can help those people and those 7 and 7s, that's, give us a shout. We'd love to work with you.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much,
me,
man.
Yeah, it was
I'm
great.
Brian LaFauci.
Patrick Marino.
Until next time.
Thank you.